In 1837, Christian Andersen's Little Mermaid was published. It's a very sad story. She sees a prince on the surface of the sea and rescues him from drowning. A witch gives her a potion to make her human, as she is, of course, in love with the prince. As a result, she gets legs, but she can't speak, and when she dances, she suffers terrible pain. She doesn't get the marriage that would break the spell. He marries somebody else. Sad, sad story. Well, the Theatre Royal in Bath is putting on a new version in the Egg for Christmas, and Bea Roberts, the writer, joins us from there. Bea, why did you choose to rework this story?
Hello. We decided to. It's such a classic story, and I think even though, as you describe, it's a very, very sad story, the original, and it has a lot of very problematic messages. The idea of mermaids and being able to travel to an underwater world and transformation has something really timeless and really captivating in it, and that was something we were just very keen to explore, but also to infuse some British folklore around sea myth, things like selkies, and we've used a myth called the Mermaid of Zena from Cornwall. So we wanted to kind of take that classic story as a starting point and then kind of build from there.
How did the Mermaid of Zena influence your piece? I had not heard of her until I started to research what you've been doing.
Sure. Well, The Mermaid of Zena is a really beautiful story. So it takes that kind of classic trope of a mermaid falling in love with a human man. But in The Mermaid of Zena, she never transforms. She's always a mermaid. And she falls for this man, Matthew, who's singing in the choir, and she goes to the church. I'm not quite sure how she gets up onto the hill into the church when she's still a mermaid, but apparently she's got a long dress and it's fine. And she gets up into the church and sees Matthew, and then a mob form when they see that there's a mermaid, and Matthew rescues her and carries her back into the ocean. And he's so captivated by this mermaid that he doesn't want to let her go. And his kind of act of selfless love of rescuing her from the village folk means that he's able to breathe underwater. So we thought there was a really wonderful element there of kind of the reverse of the transformation that we're used to in The Little Mermaid, and also a way to give it a happy ending, because this is a Christmas show as well. And so we wanted to give our Little Mermaid a slightly nicer ending than the original Hans Christian Andersen story, as you mentioned.
Now, why were you keen to give her a same-sex love interest?
Yeah, well, the interesting thing. So The Little Mermaid. When I first read it, I thought, this is horrendously misogynistic, because this poor girl she falls in love with a man. Her entire motivation to transform her body in this incredible, painful way and lose her voice is, all motivated by this man who she's only ever met when he's unconscious, and all of those things. But what I found out as I was looking into the story is that actually Hans Christian Andersen is The Little Mermaid. He wrote that story as a love letter to a man called Edvard Collin, who is a friend of his. We don't know the exact nature of that relationship because we've only got kind of letters and diaries, and it was the Victorian era. So there's a lot of sort of codified language in there. But we do know that Hans Christian Andersen was absolutely devastated when Edvard Collin got married, and he wrote The Little Mermaid, the story of someone who is in love. They transform their body to try and have the body that their lover wants. They can't ever speak their love, and then they're ultimately rejected. And so from that point of view, suddenly with that personal context, the story makes an enormous amount of sense. So making our Little Mermaid character, who we've given a name as well, she never gets a name in the original story. We've called her Morgan, which means woman of the sea. So giving her a same-sex relationship seemed like a way to, it works entirely in the subtext of the story. And also it's a sort of way to, right a historical wrong in some ways, to redress a balance of a very tragic story.
A lot of young people who will come to the play will know her from the Disney version. Mm-hmm. What have you included from Disney and what have you left out?
Hopefully a lot of the joy that people, I grew up with that version of The Little Mermaid as well. And interestingly, I think that the character Ariel is probably the least interesting thing in the entire story. And more what people really enjoy about that is the music. If you just start humming one of those, you're going to have it in your head all day, one of those Disney songs. And that, the underwater world and that sort of excitement and those kind of quirky side characters like Sebastian the lobster. So hopefully, our show has a lot of music in it. It has a lot of joy. We have a lot of those sea creatures, but we've just really bolstered that character of the Little Mermaid and given her a really strong inner drive to self-determination. She isn't a perfect little princess. She's scruffy and she's rebellious and she wants to explore. She wants to know what else is out there.
I know in the Disney, the under the sea is all bright and rather cheery, and then it's all a bit miserable when you get up to the top. What have you done about that? What's your underwater world like?
Yeah, so I've been developing the show with a company called Pins and Needles Productions, and one of the things they were really keen on was inverting that exactly how we normally see it. So, in our version, the underwater world is a kind of version of the 1950s. The princesses live in this shipwrecked cruise liner, and they're all kind of debutantes who are expected to smile and wave. And the color palette that Zoe Squire, our designers, created, it's all very drained and vintage and washed out, and we're very, very deep under the ocean. You know, where it's very oppressive and murky. And then when we come above the water, we're actually in the 1980s. Time has completely moved on, and we're in 1980s Torquay on a Duran Duran inspired yacht party, and everything's very, very bright and frothy and neon and colourful. So it's an exact flip of how we normally see these worlds presented.
Now, I know you've said that you are trying to address the often sexist stereotypes in stories for young audiences. When you think about those stereotypes, which of them makes you most cross?
Oh, now that is a tricky question because there are so many.
Have we got all day to answer that question?
Exactly. I mean, I think the idea of kind of transformation in order to be pleasing to a love interest is incredibly pernicious and damaging, and occurs across all sorts of culture, replicated all well through women's magazines into, you know, reality TV. But I think one of the ones that really annoyed me very much when I went to see a lot of children's theatre when I was sort of researching for this is the idea that the male characters can be very, very funny, and they have slapstick, and they can, you know, do whatever they like, be very, very goofy, and that the female characters are always this kind of sensible, you know, the Wendy in Peter Pan, you know, sort of chiding the boys and come along now. And that one really upsets me because, you know, I'm a female comedy writer. I know and work with an enormous amount of incredibly funny women. And that is just such a terrible, very subtle stereotype that is reinforced over and over again in lots and lots of children's work.
Bea Roberts, thank you very much indeed for being with us this morning. And The Little Mermaid will be on at the Egg at the Bath Theatre Royal for Christmas. Thank you.